Alright, now we're going to shape and bake the cookies. I'm using a nice heavyweight baking sheet, and I'm also covering the sheet with a piece of baking parchment. Baking parchment is readily available at most stores that stock baking supplies, although you can sometimes buy it by the pound from professional sources. Make sure that it's coated with silicone and not the kind that's used for pastry bags, which looks the same but is not silicone coated. This prevents sticking, it minimizes spreading, and it also makes cleanup very, very easy. This is a vintage, well-used, well-worn cookie sheet, and this also, since it may not be the cleanest in the world, makes me feel better putting the parchment on. Alright, now our dough is a nice, stiff, easy-to-shape dough. Sometimes the dough comes out a little bit looser, in which case you can't shape it quite as easily and have to put it on in spoonfuls and then shape it. What I'm doing is rough shaping it. Now often you'll read instructions that say to roll it out on a lightly floured board. That's another step. I've never done it. No one has ever complained and said I had misshapen biscotti that were obviously not rolled out on a flour-covered board. And if your dough is loose, you're not going to be able to roll it out. You're going to end up with the dough all over your hands. All right, now, sometimes the dough does get a little sticky. Notice I'm spacing it about 2 inches apart. I could make 3 if I wanted, but 2 usually works pretty well for most recipes that use about 2 cups of flour. Sticking a little more than I want, so here's a trick. I'm going to go over to the sink and rinse my hands lightly in cold water and shake them off. I now have wet hands that have been rinsed in cold water. What happens when you rinse your hands in cold water is that things don't stick and you can shake them. So you sort of play around with it. It's not that fragile. And you want to get it so it's maybe about a ½ inch high and, maybe about 2 inches wide. Remember, biscotti come in all different sizes. There are really long, skinny ones, there are short, fat ones, so there really is no standard. However yours come out will be the way you intended it to be. Well, that's what you tell people anyway. So now we have our nice bars. Now I think that looks just about right. It'll regulate itself as it bakes. And I'm going to put it in my preheated 350-degree oven. And we'll put it in for about 25 minutes. I'm going to check it after 20 minutes to make sure it's not baking faster than I thought. Ovens vary. It's a good idea periodically to use an oven thermometer to calibrate your oven. Alright, so we're going to put it in, check it in about 20 minutes. When it's firm to the touch and nicely browned, then we'll take it out and proceed to the next step. Alright, I checked the biscotti at 20 minutes. They weren't quite done. I gave it another 5 minutes, and now at 25 minutes, they're firm and nicely browned. So I'm going to turn off the oven, take them out, and we'll transfer them to the cooling rack. Alright, there they are. If you press them, they're firm, and they're just a little bit of brown on them. Now, since I have them on parchment, what I can do carefully to avoid burning myself is to slip them off. Let me get the sheet out of the way so I don't accidentally burn myself on it. Now I'd like to get the bottoms away from the parchment so they don't get soggy. It's still quite hot and it's too fragile to cut up, but if I peel it gently side, we're going to be able to slip the parchment paper off. Now this will allow air to circulate all over. I'm going to give these about 10 minutes to firm up. I want them to be cool enough so they're not going to crumble, but not so firm that they'll give me trouble as I slice them into cookies. Alright, these have been cooling for about 10 minutes. If you look at the underside, they're nice and browned, they're nice and sturdy, but they're not rock hard. I have this board that I reserve for cutting sweet things, again like the little board that I use to cut up the nuts. No onion or garlic or anything like that sees this board. I like to use this serrated knife. I find that it makes the cutting easier. And you have choice for how thick or thin you want them. To get a little longer shape, I like to cut them on the diagonal, like this, and cut them, I aim for about a ½ inch thick, so it'll look like this. Now what I'm going to do is cut up both of these, and then I will move on to the next step, which will be to crisp them up. Biscotti are actually twice baked cookies. This is the first baking. Zweiback in German is another twice baked cookie. First baking is to get to this stage, then we cut them, and if you wanted to eat them right now, perfectly good. In fact, I usually save the ends for tasting. Alright, so I get this one cut up, and then I'm going to make room, I'm going to move it over back to the cooling rack. Now, if you read a lot of instructions on making biscotti, they'll tell you to put it back on the baking sheet, lower the temperature a little bit, like to 325 degrees from 350, and after about 6 minutes, flip it over. I decided that this was simply too much trouble. So instead of putting it back on the baking sheet, I put it on the cooling rack so that it can dry out on both sides at once. This is also now clearing the decks for the second strip. And I've lowered the heat of the oven to about 225 degrees. And what I'm going to do once this, that was the signal that says that the cookies are ready to cut. So again, it's not a precise thing. I said 10 minutes, if it's 8 minutes, it doesn't really matter. Right, so that as soon as this is done, I'll put this on the sheet with the other cookies, and then we'll put in the oven, which I'd set down to 225 degrees, and I will leave it in for about a ½ an hour. You can vary it depending on how firm you want the cookies. Some trial and error involved here, but I find that this works pretty well. I've also done it at higher heat, 325, for about 10 minutes, but I like drying them out more slowly. Once they dry out, they'll last for a long time. Since you may have noted the one thing missing from these is added fat. They're sort of lean, they will not turn rancid, and you can keep them for a month, although they won't last as long. They also freeze very nicely. If you want to have them on hand, make sure they don't disappear in the meantime. Alright, now, and crumbs are also very good. Alright, now I have my biscotti spread out. I try to do it so they don't drop on the way to the oven. In 30 minutes, I'll take them out. I'll let them cool till they're nice and firm, and then I will pack them away. Once you've cooked the biscotti sufficiently so that they are nice and crisp, and the way to check for crispness is to eat a piece, and that will also tell you that your flavorings are right. You can pack it away in plastic bags to store or to freeze, or if you're having somebody drop in for coffee, or if you want to give someone a really nice gift, put them in a bowl. If you've bought my book, Wooden Bowls from the Scroll Saw, you can follow the instructions here to make a bowl similar to this one, which will be a lovely presentation piece. I always like to line bowls with napkins, a nice quality paper napkin. Luncheon size is just about right for this. And just heap it up with your delicious cookies. If you're going to give this as a gift, you might cover it with some plastic. And you're all set for a completely homemade gift. I hope this video has inspired you both to make biscotti and to make bowls. Thanks very much for watching.